Okay, I want to welcome everyone to Sell Smarter, Proven Sales Strategies for Small Businesses. We have our very own Boston business mentors as presenters today, Beverly Gottlieb and Dick Rossman. I will tell you just a little bit about Boston Business Mentors, if Dick will go to the next slide, and let you know what kind of services we can offer you at this time. We have a great website. We're constantly updating it and making it better. And right now, the resource page is looking pretty good. Lots of great information that you can download there or read about. So take a look at bbmentors.org website, look under resources, and you should see lots of little tidbits there for you. Another great way we work with the small business community is through our workshops and our webinars. I've got a couple coming in the beginning of December, and then we'll have a full complement of presentations after the first year, as soon as we get through all the holidays. So look for those that I have in December. There's some really fantastic topics, and updated newsletters will be going out for those. We also advertise those through our website as well. So take a look. Without a doubt, there is no doubt, the most important thing that Boston Business Mentors does is offering free mentorship to the small business community. Our mentors are fantastic, and I think they're the best in the country. And they have a variety of skill sets and experiences that they've learned from that they can share with you. Whether you're just getting started or you're ready to leave your business, we have folks with skills that can assist you. It's not uncommon that a team of mentors will be created. As your needs change, your primary mentor will invite in others to work with you along the way. So you can ask for mentoring using that QR code on the screen, or go to the bbmentors.org website, and there's a button for filling out a request for a mentor. I'll throw something into the chat as well. We are recording, and I will follow up with that, or the follow-up email with you, so that you have that recording link so you can watch it later. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dick and Beverly.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you. Nice to see you all here today. My name is Dick Rossman. I'm participating and leading this webinar with my partner in crime from Boston Business Mentors, Beverly Gottlieb. And let's start. Beverly, why don't you give the group a little bit of background about yourself? I'll do the same, and then we'll get going.
Thank you, Dick. I attended the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School and started my career as an accountant. I was certified and then decided to start a company at the age of 25. I did insurance planning and benefits planning. It was mainly a sales organization, and I am able, because of that, to help not only small businesses learn how to run a business, but focus strongly on the sales aspect of their business. I sold my company 25 years later to a publicly traded company, and I have been with Boston Business Mentors and mentoring for 9 years. Dick?
Thanks, Beverly. My small business career started when I joined a family-owned commercial printing company outside of Boston. Joined as a salesperson and became vice president sales and marketing for the company. When I left the company after about 25 years, we had sales of around 30 odd million and employing almost 300 people. A fairly successful and small business and a great experience in getting started. I joined a software startup as a sales and marketing VP. That company didn't do as well as my family-owned business. And I actually left that business and got back into the printing industry in a different company for a number of years. Then I became a sales coach, a sales trainer, and a sales consultant, helping small business owners and small and teams to improve their selling, improve their closing, and their messaging. So I've been a mentor and Boston Business Mentor for about as long as Beverly, as I realized. 8 or 9 years. So let's get started. Um, Before we go to this slide, though, I'd just like to get a sense of who's in the audience, who's in our group today. So if you can put a few words in the chat about what your company sells, what's the product or service that you are responsible for selling? And Teresa, maybe you'll just read them off when you start to get some.
Yeah, I can do that. Oh, let me make sure. There we go. All right, chat, you can start putting into chat. I changed the setting. It keeps defaulting to blocked for us. Yep, we've just fixed that. So please go ahead. Real estate consulting is number one.
This is a very shy group.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I had to switch over the there we go. Um I'm not sure how to pronounce this, but founder of Many Juices, a juice startup specializing in iron health, med spa, baking cookies and cakes from home. So yeah, we have a nice group today, a
Great.
variety.
Thanks, folks. Beverly and I have given this webinar a number of times, and I'm always amazed and pleased at the wide breadth of backgrounds and interests and products and services that the folks here sell. All right, so as we get started, let's make sure we're all on the same page, and so that we all understand the difference between sales and marketing. Marketing is all your advertising, your social media, your branding, any blogs that you may be writing, any webinars, any speaking engagements, podcasts, direct mail, all of those activities are wonderful. And their goal is to make people aware of your product and service. And Boston Business Mentors has a number of other webinars about how to improve your marketing. So pay attention to our weekly email, and maybe one of them will be right for you. But today, we're talking about sales. Sales is what puts money in your pocket. Sales gets the order. And that's where our focus is today. Many of you I'm gonna be pretty sure of are solopreneurs. You're the only person in your company, and that means that one of the hats that you wear is a sales hat, a very important hat. So if you own your business, basically you are in sales. And many people aren't comfortable with that. I've worked with folks who've had a financial background, perhaps, or are engineers, and marketing and sales don't come naturally to those folks in general. Yeah, I'm generalizing, I know, but what I found is that those folks and others, by practicing, by creating some processes, they work and they become much more comfortable and successful in sales. And so that's really what we're going to be talking about today. Because when you say salesperson, salesman, saleswoman, there's what's the perception that people have of salespeople, of selling? Put a couple of words in the chat when I say salesperson. What are some of the phrases that come to mind? Teresa, maybe you'll just read
Yep.
them.
Pushy, sketchy, car dealer, slick.
I've asked this question a number of times, and no one has ever come back and said, "Wonderful person, really helpful." I'm afraid that the comments are for the most part negative, and that's a problem. But how we can solve that problem is by paying attention for the next hour or so and learning that really what salespeople are problem solvers. And if you think of yourself as a problem solver, if you don't like to think of yourself as a salesperson, think of yourself as a problem solver, because that's really what a salesperson does. A salesperson has a product or a service that can solve someone's problem. And their goal is to ask the right questions to uncover that problem and see if that problem is large enough at the moment for the prospect to be willing to spend his time and his money in working with that salesperson solving. So you're going to hear that phrase a lot today. So thinking of yourself as a problem solver can make you feel much more comfortable in the selling process. Um, because as we said, selling doesn't come naturally to everyone. Sometimes the questioning, the conversations are uncomfortable, but you need to realize that if the process is done properly, you've got a valuable service to offer or a product to offer, and done properly, and it is a process, then you're going to benefit as the seller because you're going to be earning a commission, some compensation, and the buyer is going to have a problem that's been lingering, and it's going to have that problem solved if done right. However, the other point that needs to be understood is that you aren't going to be able to close a sale every time you have a selling conversation. And so you need to be able to handle some rejection. And but what you need to be thinking about is, fine, that person isn't ready today. Maybe I wasn't able to convince that person, or in my questioning, my conversations, that today was the day, that this is the time that problem is worth solving. So your job then is to stay in touch with that person in a proper manner, not being a pest, so that when that problem gets large enough, that you're the one that they turn to help solve that problem. Also remember, people want to buy. People like to buy, but no one wants to be sold to. I coincidentally, I happen to be being in touch with a salesperson who's in vacation sales, and this guy doesn't get it. I'm interested in buying, but he just wants to sell, and he's being a bit obnoxious about it, and that's turning me off. Maybe I know too much about selling so that I recognize what he's doing, but maybe I'll make him a Boston Business Mentor client and help him out. We'll see. But again, you need to recognize that people want or need to buy because they have a problem you can solve, and we want to keep that intention at all times. Now, what's important about this process and yourself is that you need to believe in the benefits that your product and service bring to your customer. If you have some doubts that you can help folks, that your product has all those benefits that you really say it does, then you're never going to get started. You need to believe that you can solve your customers' problems, and you also need to believe that and have the right attitude that says that you're going to be successful today. You're going to be able to convince that person that you indeed have that solution. Because if you think, well, I'm not sure that this conversation is going to be going anywhere today. That's what we call head trash, and you're never going to be a successful person if you have head trash that's going on in your mind. Head trash is what goes on, which has no basis in fact, but it occurs to us in our consciousness, and it stops us from taking the right actions that we know need to be taken. Let me give you an example. Let's say we're in a networking meeting. There's 20 folks in the room. Everyone's there for the same purpose, to meet each other. And you look across the room and you see someone, and they've got their arms folded and they're looking at you a little bit oddly. And you think to yourself, I'm not even going to talk to that person. They don't look very open. They're not very receptive. They're giving me a funny look. You have no basis. There's no basis in fact for any of that. That's head trash. And in order to be that person may be a great customer for you, but you've given up before you even started in that case. So it's important to recognize this head trash when it pops up, and to ignore it and to put it out of your head. The other important fact that you need to keep in your mind at all times is being able to separate your identity from your role. What do I mean by that? Your identity is who you are as a person. You're spouse, you're a father, you're a grandfather, you're a mother, you're a neighbor. Those are all characteristics of your identity. And we hope that you think of yourself at all times as on the scale of 1 to 10 as a 9 or a 10. That you're a good person at all times, and you have a um, high regard for your identity. But we also all have lots of roles that we take on in our lives. Today we're talking about our role as a salesperson. And so maybe one day in your role as that salesperson, you make 20 cold calls and no one picks up the phone. You get an email from a good customer and they've had to cancel their last order. Um, you know, you wanted to be accepted into a trade show and you were too late. It wasn't a good day for you in your role as a salesperson. And maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, you're only a 4 or a 5 that day. But that doesn't mean that in your role, in your identity as a person, you're still a 9 or a 10. So your job for that day is to think about what you're going to do the next day to make your think of yourself in your salesperson role as an 8 or a 9 or a 10. But always being able to separate those two is really important uh, for your well-being. What's really important as we get started here is being able to define who your customer is. Sometimes I'll work with a mentoring client and I'll ask them that question. They'll say, "Oh, everyone can use my product and my service." And I say, "Well, that may be true, but it's not especially realistic because you can't market to everyone. It's just not it's not possible, and it won't get you where you want to be. So what you need to do is define your target. Pick a niche. You can use geography. Let's say you want to it's important that you physically meet your customers. So you want to pick New England as your target area. You want to work with women. You want to work with women between the ages of 25 and 45. Let's say your product is something that's of interest to human resource professionals, and you want to narrow that niche down and work with folks in the pharmaceutical industry because you've got some background there. That's a niche. That's narrowing down and defining your target customer in a way that is manageable. Because your goal here is to become a big fish in a little pond. You want to become the go-to person. You want to be recognized as the expert in that pond, whatever pond you pick. And you can pick more than one pond, but it's a lot easier to start with one. With this niche, you can market a lot easier. You can get a database of contacts. You can pick a small number of trade shows to attend to meet your prospects. Marketing is much more focused, much easier done. And being recognized as an expert means that people are going to be coming to you. Let me give you an example. One of my clients is a commercial construction company, small one. They work primarily in building small malls or modifying small office buildings, office parks. And their business was good, but it wasn't great because they had a lot of competition. There were a number of small construction companies that do what they do. One day he got a new client who was a veterinarian, and he learned the specifics about what's required for a veterinarian office and laboratory, and did a great job. The build out went very well, and that vet started to recommend his other veterinarian friends to him for when they needed expansion, et cetera. And he became known as the construction company for veterinarian companies. Um, he learned who the bankers were, the lenders who lent to vets. Um, he he learned where they marketed themselves. He went to their trade shows as that expert, and he became very successful in narrowing down his focus and picking that niche. And he and as it happened, he was also approached by a dentist, and he started to develop that's his second pond. So he's now building out dental practices and becoming as successful there as well. So think about narrowing your target market, becoming the expert, and being able to market directly to that smaller target. Let's talk a little bit about value, because many people who are selling a product or a service think it's all about you, and it's not. It's not about all your wonderful features. It's all about the problems that you solve. And what's important is being able to understand what the problems are that your customers have. In parlance, we use we call those pains, and usually they aren't physical pains, but they're emotional pains. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. But being able to recognize what makes your offering valuable and what distinguishes your products from and your services and you, because you're a big part of what you're selling, from your competition. So understanding who your competition is, but more importantly, what distinguishes you and your services from that competition is really important. Always be asking yourself the question, why should your customer buy from you? And there should be several answers to that question. Some of them, again, revolving around the problems that you solve, and then specifically what you bring to your table and what you bring to your customer's table. And all your messaging should be focusing in this direction. Your website, your elevator pitch, any content should be focused from the point of view of those benefits that you can provide to the problems you solve. For example, in an elevator pitch, I always like to start an elevator pitch with the phrase, I help people who. I help, or it could be I work with folks who, and then talk about the problem they have, or I help people, and then go into the problem that they have. That, as opposed to, I'm in the HR benefits service, and I can provide insurance, weight loss programs, smoking cessation programs. That doesn't. That's just simply cold. Doesn't get you any interest. When you talk about the problems that you've solved, then you're attracting some people's attention. And in order to do that, in order to attract their attention and uncover what their real pain is, you need to ask the questions. And the questions that I find to work the best are what are called pain questions. And this is a symbol here of something called the pain funnel and pain funnel questions. And if you can follow this, you will uncover what their emotional response is. And then you know that you've uncovered what their real problem is. Because people, as we said, when people hear, or understand that you're in a selling situation, or you're a salesperson, that wall goes up. And automatically people are suspect about anything that you may be saying. The way to get over that wall or break it down is by asking the right questions. So let me give you an example. Let's say you sell human resource benefits to small business owners, and you're in a networking event, and you meet a woman and you say what you do, and use some emotion, say what the problems that you can solve are, and she says, I'm thinking I need to be adding some benefits. The ones I offer now to my employees, they aren't adequate. Yeah, I've got the basics. I've got long-term care and short-term care and health insurance, but they're looking for more. And so the typical salesperson, when he hears that, at least internally, starts to jump up and down and say, I do that. That's what I do. That's what I do. Um, let's meet so I can tell you everything that I do. Well, I'm going to suggest, instead of going that direction, to take a more effective direction. And that's by asking some questions. And so start with some of these pain funnel questions. Oh, really? Tell me a little bit more about that. Um, how long do you think this has been a problem for you? What have you done to try and solve this situation? If you don't solve it, what do you think is going to happen? And note, I'm using a lot of tonality, a lot of empathy in my voice. That's really important here because you're trying to establish some rapport with this person and show that you're interested, that you care. And what you may learn as you ask these questions is that, and I'm making this up, but it's a possibility that a couple of this woman's key employees have left the company because her competitors are offering much better benefits at no real additional cost to the employees, and they need more than what's being provided by this woman's company. And this woman is really afraid if she loses another key employee, her company may be in jeopardy. So what I said there was the key word, afraid. That's one of the emotional words that you're looking to hear. And I have an acronym here called FUDWACA: fear, uncertainty, doubt, worry, anger, concern, anxiety, and there's lots more. But when you hear one of those words, I'm really worried about ... I'm angry that. I'm concerned that. Now you know that you've asked all the right questions and you've uncovered what the real problem is, that usually you're not going to get right out of the chute from the first conversation. And so now you're in a position to say to as the salesperson, to say to this woman business owner, I've worked with folks who've been in that same situation. I understand what's going on, and I've helped them. I don't know that I can help you, but I think it would make sense that we meet for half an hour and let me learn more and see what I might suggest. Are you going to get that meeting? You sure as shooting are going to get that meeting because you've asked the right questions. You've uncovered what a real problem is. You've shown your interest, with your tonality, and you haven't tried to sell her. You said, I don't know that I can help you, but I think maybe if we meet for half an hour, we can see and I can learn more and offer some suggestions. That's a non-salesy response that 99 times out of 100 gets a follow-up meeting. All right, let's talk a little bit about price, because many people think that if their price is lower than their competition, that they're going to sell more. And I'm going to say baloney, because low price doesn't necessarily equal best value. And that's what you want to be selling, your value, the value of your offering, the specific value that you as the owner of the company bring to the table, and the value that you have in understanding your prospects' problems and your ability to solve them. Because when you establish that value, price becomes far less important in the decision. And so when you've been in a competitive situation and your prospect says, I'm sorry, I didn't select you because I think your price is too high. Well, I'm going to suggest that maybe you haven't asked the right questions. You haven't done a good enough job in the sales process, because it's easy for someone to tell a salesperson, sorry, I didn't go with you because your price was too high. You can't, usually you can't really prove that. You don't know. And it's an easy thing for them to say. But I'm going to assert that is often not the real reason why you haven't been selected. It's the not recognizing what their problem is and adequately explaining how you can solve it. And in that regard, what's important is understanding who else is selling what you're selling. Know your competitors, know what they do well, what you do better, um, and understand how you differ from them. It's really important. And also assume that your competitors are smart and they're capable, and you never want to criticize them. I learned that the hard way as a rookie salesperson when I was in the printing industry. And one of my good clients asked me to bid on a job, and he asked one of my competitors to also provide a bid. And I said something snarky about that company. And he didn't appreciate that. He didn't say anything at the time, but I certainly didn't get that order. And I didn't get any for a couple of weeks. And finally, I approached him. I said, what's going on? Have we done something to upset you here? And he said, yeah. Um, Remember that conversation we had a couple of weeks ago about XYZ job? You said something that wasn't especially complimentary about um, the other company that was in the running, and I took that personally. I think they're a good organization, and I wouldn't select them if I didn't. And so when you said something derogatory about them, you actually made that something personal to me. Well, naturally, I learned that lesson. We got back on track, but you can imagine I never did that again. What is important is that you know who your competition is and you understand the arguments that they will use in competing with you, and be prepared to present your defense in advance. One way to do this and be proactive is talk to some of their customers. Maybe some of their customers now are also working with you or once worked with you. Give them a call and ask them, why are you working with that company? Just love to know what they're offering and what they say that was so positive that you selected them as a client. And also remember that customers or prospects aren't ready necessarily today to have that problem solved, but when they are ready, you want them to think of you when they're ready to work with a new company. We started out the webinar by acknowledging that you wear lots of hats. You got an operations hat, you got a marketing hat, you got a finance hat, and you also need to be wearing a salesperson's hat. And I want to suggest that that's really important that you recognize that, and uh, and don't try to wing it in sales, because you can't be successful. My suggestion is that every week you set aside some time to sell. Put it in your calendar. Maybe it's every Monday morning from 9 to 11, whatever works for you. But use that time, don't override it. Use that time to um, make some new calls, follow up with some of the leads that come in on your social media. Speak to some of your past clients. Always keep track of who your past clients are. Go back to them, follow up, see what's going on in their world now. Maybe there's an opportunity for you to sell something again. Um, Use that time to do some of your marketing, whatever it may be. Make a plan and stick to it. And the best way to do that are to set some goals. And the goals that I'm talking about here are what we call SMART goals. They're specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're relevant, they're time bound. That's a SMART goal. And we'll talk a little bit more about those at the end of the webinar. Right now, I'm going to introduce Beverly, and she's going to pick this back up.
Thank you, Dick. Well, I like to start with the mantra that I always had, which is successful people do what others aren't willing to do. And sometimes you need to say that to yourself because you don't want to make that phone call, or you don't want to go up to that person at the networking event who has their arms crossed. But successful people Successful people do what others aren't willing to do. I'm going to touch a little bit more on what Dick started talking about defining your customer. It is so important because it will help you figure out how to find them, where to find them, and very importantly, what to say to them. You want to know their problems. You not only want to know all about the problems that you solve for them, but all of their problems. The more you know about them and their industry, the more that they feel like you've created rapport, the more they feel that you understand what's going on, that you're an expert in their industry. That may give you the edge against competition because they figure you're not just selling this product, you know about them as a whole. You see them, and that's so important. What's also important is that you find out where do they get their information from? How do they generally make a decision? What trade shows do they go to? What websites do they visit? What periodicals do they subscribe to? What do they have in common with each other? Because the more you can find out about that, the more you can find others like them. That's the goal. If they're your key customer, you want more of them. Next slide. When you define your customer, you may also have multiple segments. For example, I had a locksmith, and the locksmith um, sold to, he helped out BU students, BC students, Northeastern students who got locked out on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights. That was his bread and butter for easy cash flow. But really, what was important to him was to get the building manager of a big condo group or an apartment building. That's where he made more money. Now you can really see in this example, you would market two different ways to two different types of people. And a lot of people say to me, well, I'm just starting out. I don't even know who my customer is. Well, that's called the shotgun approach. And you have to do that sometimes in the beginning. But you really want to take the time to look at who is actually becoming your customer and see what they have in common. And also think outside the box. Just because a certain segment is unaddressed doesn't mean it's not profitable. I worked a great deal with engineers, and people told me in the beginning, why would you work with engineers? They ask too many questions. And my response was, well, they know the answers. I worked with startups. People said, well, startups aren't profitable. And that was very short-sighted because startups grow and I grew with them. And by the time they became plum customers for other people, I had done such a good job, they couldn't dislodge me. So I got in early when it was, quote, unprofitable, but it really was profitable. When you want to network for prospects, it's much easier now than when I started. Make a list. It can be in Excel, it can be in a new notebook, but what you want to do is mark down who will buy now, who will buy later, and who could provide you with referrals, which is just as important. And I mean, you can go to your Facebook friends, you can go through your phone contacts, you can go to your Instagram followers, you can go to LinkedIn. You have so many places to see where there are prospects for you. And it can be friends, it can be family, it can be clients, it can be vendors to get referrals from. You'd be surprised where you can get referrals from. Even somebody who doesn't buy from you. Maybe you've gone through the entire process, they adore you, and then they found out the president's brother-in-law does the same thing as you and they have to buy from him. Or that they don't have the budget this year. They almost feel like they're obligated to give you something because you've tried so hard and they want to help you out because you were there to help them out. You also never know where your next best client is coming from or customer. Um, an example is tell everybody what you do in a very gentle way. Your soundbite. People say, "What do you do?" I was literally having my hand operated on, and the OR nurse was trying to keep me amused while that was going on. And she asked me what I did. And I told her I mentor at Boston Business Mentors. And I explained a little bit about what our organization does. And she says, I have a friend who's starting a company. Can I have your information? And I have a new customer or a client as a result of that. I was also recently at a bar restaurant having a quick dinner, and somebody next to me asked what I did. I did the same thing. And I told them what I do in Boston Business Mentors. He goes, my wife and I have a company, and we'd really like to talk to you. So you never know. Don't prejudge. Just throw it out to the universe, to everyone you meet, and tell them what you do. Networking at conferences. Don't sit down. Don't talk to the people from your organization. You want to meet as many people as possible, especially if there's a lunch. If there are 3 people from your company and you all sit at the same table of 10, you're going to meet really 7 other people. But if each of you sits at a separate table, remember, successful people do what others aren't willing to do because it's uncomfortable. When you can be comfortable with each other, you're going to meet 27 new people. And that's why you're there. I always suggest you be the first person at the conference. Yes, you may be the only one in the room in the beginning, but you're going to meet a lot more people that way. If there's a breakfast, be the first one at the breakfast. Maybe eat part of the breakfast at one table. Once you've met everybody, go to the next table. If there is something where it's a conference and you're overnight and people go to the bar, drink soda water, go to the bar. Why? Don't go to your room. You have an opportunity to meet more people. The whole reason you're at a meeting or a conference is to meet as many people as possible. One of the wonderful things is also having somebody else fill your pipeline. Rather than do it all yourself, if there's somebody who can help you out, that would be wonderful. I had somebody who was a part-time CFO. She went to 4 new companies a year and would bring me in to do the benefits. Then she would go on to the next companies, but I would remain with these companies and grow with these companies as they grew. So every year I knew I was going to get 4 new clients. What's another example? You're a florist or a caterer. You are affiliated with a wedding planner. People go to a wedding planner. Literally, the wedding planner's job is to find them a caterer and a florist. Also, share leads within an industry. A caterer can give it to a florist. So, there's a balance between the two. I had somebody who went to a trade show, and at the trade show, they sold high-end instruments, and the other sold high-end amplifiers. Well, if somebody's going to spend a lot on an instrument, it's likely they're going to want a high-end amplifier. They were able to share leads. So think of somebody who is selling to the same group as you and try and share leads. Also, I'll always tell people this, think outside the box. I actually would do anything to get invited to a venture capital, a VC's Christmas party. Why? Because all their portfolio companies were there. All the startups were there. It was the best group I could possibly talk to. And what I would do is introduce myself, find out about their company, and then I would say at the time, do you have a card? And do you mind if I call you on Monday? Because nobody wants to hear about benefits, which is what I did at this. They're there for a shrimp and a cocktail. Okay. So what I would do is take their name and number, and I would call them on Monday and set up an appointment for me to go see them. Next slide. Social media. Social media does work, and it's a great thing in your toolbox. That's the best way to look at it. It's only one of the things you can be doing. Some people, for some reason, think, well, if I'm on Facebook or Instagram, people will find me. It doesn't really work that way. But you need to have, of course, a present, which you keep current. You need to keep posting to keep people interested. Facebook is great for visual products, clothing, jewelry. Join chat rooms, become an expert, start answering questions in a chat room. People are going to recognize that. LinkedIn is wonderful. LinkedIn is great for priming the pump because when you do ask for a referral, you should really help people to know what you're looking for. So if you just say, well, do you know anybody who lives in, this area? That's kind of vague. Or can you refer somebody to me? They don't know who they're supposed to be referring to you. You want to describe your customer. You want to really give them an idea so it jogs something in their minds so they can figure out who to introduce you to. If you were going through LinkedIn, you can see who they're affiliated with and see, gee, who's the CFO at a company? I might need that. Or I really want to be in this particular company, and I see this person wouldn't be a person that I would want to talk to at that company, but they might know that person. So it's helpful if you actually can suggest some names or at least suggest the criteria, and that's called priming the pump. It's also great if you can get noticed by an influencer, but a lot of influencers want to be paid. But there are some that if your product is so great, they may just kind of promote you a little bit. And also try and get yourself known in other ways. Again, think outside the box. Is there somebody who might do a podcast that you're featured on? Or could you get on Chronicle as this new type of a company or a new type of a product or made in Massachusetts? All of these are great exposure. The whole purpose of prospecting is exposure. Cold calling does work, and we're going to talk more about that, but you may want to buy a list. That is something that can be valuable depending on your industry. Blogging and videos, that can be very helpful. They can get passed around. You can be seen as an expert. And email campaigns like Constant Contact. Now, that can also be helpful depending on your industry. The thing is about when you go to somebody for an email campaign is that you really want to be careful to define your customer because you might go to Constant Contact and they give you 500 leads. 500 leads. But really, if you had defined your customer, you would have had 100 of those leads. If you had the 100 of the leads, 10 gave you appointments, you sold 3. If you had 500, still the only good customers in there are still the 100. You're still going to meet with the same 10 and then sell the same 3. But you've wasted a lot more time, a lot more money, and heard a lot more no's. So the better you define your customer, the more advantageous it's going to be for you. And again, think outside the box. The Secretary of State used to have new corporations, and the list came out quarterly. The best time in my office was when I had those 400 leads. I had to go through and pick out the ones I wanted. I had to go to a phone booth and call information 400 times because the only place to get free information, phone numbers at the time, was from a phone booth. Successful people do what others aren't willing to do. And I would have 400 people to call the beginning of each quarter. I was so excited. We had somebody who opened a dental practice in the Crown Colony area. It's a part of Quincy. And there's a lot of different businesses there. And so what he did was he dropped off flower baskets that had his brochure in it. And because he was a dental practice and people didn't want to go far, they wanted to take their lunch hour or an hour out of work to go to a dentist. That's how he grew his practice. So take the time, think outside the box, think about where these people gather, how to reach them. Because once you have more prospects, you're going to have more sales. Next slide. So there are two sides to when you go on Google, for example. One is the banner at the top and at the side, and that's pay per click, which means that they actually in the background do a kind of bidding to be that banner. The problem is if you're there and somebody clicks on your banner and you don't convert them to a client, you're going to be spending a lot of money because you pay per click. The best thing you can do is pay somebody to do SEO, search engine optimization. You can do it yourself, but if you are going to do anything, I would suggest you do that. Also, it is really great for you to know what's involved in search engine optimization, which means that you are moving up the page organically. It's not as easy as just putting up a website. You need AdWords. We have entire webinars on how to improve your search engine optimization. But that's really what you want to do. You want to be on that first page. How do you get on that first page? And it's by people going to your website. It's by many different things, but it's really important that you pay attention to this, because just putting your website up is not going to get you recognized. Page. Direct mail. People laugh. If somebody sent me a card in February saying we clean windows, I would save that card and call them in April, because I don't know a window cleaner. I could go on Google, but if it came through the mail and I'm like, oh, that's something I really need, I'm going to hold on to this. So, mattering on your industry, direct mail can work. Trade shows. Trade shows are wonderful. They can work. Remember, talk to the attendees, talk to the other vendors, stand at the front. It's a great way to have a lot of exposure. Strategic and complementary partners, we touched on before, very important. Speaking engagements, educational seminars. Why not? It depends on your industry. I had somebody who did workouts, and she would give free workouts, and then people would then follow her or take her on her online videos. I had people who do investment planning. They got a taste of it. They tax accountants. You give people a little bit of knowledge. The best thing you can do is put a card on their chair that says, I need more information about X, Y, and Z. And then if they drop that to you, on the back, you have their email, their phone numbers. Those are your hot leads. Never give a talk, whether it's online or it's in person, where you cannot get the email address minimum of the people who are attending, because you want to be able to reach out to them. They are leads, hot leads, if they send in that card to you. And always, if you are doing a speaking engagement, stay afterwards, because people sometimes are embarrassed to ask questions in a large group and they want to come up to you afterwards. They may take your card. And the other thing about cards, you can do e-cards where you're very easy to exchange, or V-cards where you're very easy to exchange information, because a lot of people don't have business cards and you don't want to spend a lot of time putting their contact information in the phone. You just have to touch. Other things, festivals, open markets, beer gardens, 5Ks, something that gets you a lot of exposure. Again, you don't know who your next best customer is going to be, and you have to think outside the box if it suits your industry. Next slide. Elevator speech. I love elevator speeches. You should say them in 2 minutes. The one I used to say is, um, I do insurance planning and benefits planning for the high tech and biotech industry. I work with the founders of startups. So one thing, in addition to what Dick said, was I like that last line, because I am telling them who I need to meet. It could be, gee, I sell this hand cream and it's amazing for women over 50 as their hands dry out. I mean, you want to kind of target it a little bit, and you need to be so comfortable with it, it just comes out. Like I said, while your hand is being operated or you're sitting, you know, at a bar restaurant, it's not pushy, it's just telling people what you do. And then once they start talking to you, ask those probing questions, ask those pain points that Dick was talking about. Oh, you have a current vendor? Does your vendor, have you had any problems? What did they solve? Have you had any problems associated with this? Or did you know, if they aren't saying any problems, these are the problems that can happen to you? Did anyone ever talk to you about that? You want to build rapport. You want to uncover if there are any problems. You need to listen and develop solutions. And then you want to talk about how you can help them. It's not about you, it's all about them. The longer you get them talking, the more you hear about what their problems are, the more they open up, the more they give you that little tidbit that you're listening and say, oh, I've heard that happen before, and this is how I can solve it. And always ask for the follow-up. It's key that you ask for the follow-up. If you're in front of somebody and you have to put together a proposal, then say, oh, why don't we set an appointment for 2 weeks? Let's pick a time. I'll call you at the beginning of that week and just to confirm that it's still a good time for you. Because why chase them for a meeting when you're right there? You can set the meeting and then do a confirmation. So always ask for the next step. Next slide. Telephone work does work, and it does sometimes take a long time. I had somebody who made 2 phone calls and said it didn't work. Maybe after 200 phone calls, it doesn't work. It doesn't mean what the list you're calling from is bad. It doesn't mean that what you're saying is bad. It's a numbers game. It really is. But there's ways to improve your outcomes. One, always be positive and have a solid message. When I worked, right now, as you know, it gets dark around 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I'd be making phone calls, and I had windows in front of me. And when the time changed, it would reflect back to me. And I saw as I was making my cold calls, I was smiling. I was very positive. Why? Because this is my opportunity to make money. I felt good about making these calls. If you have to sit there and say, oh, I got to make these 10 calls, you might as well not make them because you're not going to come across very good. I always got my first call. And I think it's because it was distinct, it was special. And that's what you have to make each call sound like, that they are the only person you're calling that day, and they are the most important person on the earth that you could be talking to. And you really care about them. You want your script to roll off your tongue. You need inflection. You need pace. You want it to sound like you're talking to a friend. And if you do that, it's going to come across and they're going to want to talk to you. Now, some people want to send an email first. That's fine. Send the email, describe yourself, and then say, hey, I sent you an email. I'd really like to talk to you about this. Do you have a few minutes? It's great because you can't uncover somebody's problems in an email. You can introduce yourself, maybe get your foot in the door. Maybe they'll be a little familiar with you, but you can't hear their problems to solve. And remember, the best time to call may not be the best time for you. I used to call early in the morning and late on a Friday afternoon because the assistant wasn't there to block them. And so I would get through the owner because who was working? Me as an owner and them as an owner. So, like I said, successful people do what others aren't willing to do. Next. And the goal is to set a meeting. It's not to sell your product. You're not going to sell your product over the phone. But you want to get in front of that person or get a Zoom meeting with them. You want to see them. You want to build rapport. You want to build a relationship. And ask questions. Build rapport. The longer you keep them on the phone, the more likely you are to get an appointment. And you want to educate them, not sell. Did you know? Did you know this and this can happen? It makes more sense than to just spill what you're doing because you really want to hear their response, hear their problems. And if you try and get an appointment and they say no, do not take it personally. See if there's a better time to meet with them because it could be the bad time of the year. You're not going to call an accountant between January and actually May 15th because they didn't get all their Aprils done. You want to find out if there's a better time because there's a slow time of the year, or that they make a decision at a certain time of the year because that's when a contract for something renews. You don't know if they just got off the phone with their divorce lawyer. You don't know what's going on in their lives. Are they waiting for money from the venture capitals? Are they moving their offices in a week? So always ask if there's a better time to call and be really organized and make that follow-up call. Next slide. Establishing rapport. I worked really well with people who graduate from MIT. They have a signature ring. They call it the brass rat. So if I ever walked in and there was a brass rat on their finger, I knew I had another client because I knew how to make them feel. They were able to easily trust me and know that I knew everything about what I was talking about and would help them make a good decision and would protect that decision and take care of anything that went wrong. We're able to create that type of rapport. And body language is really important. Like if somebody is talking to you, lean forward, that you're interested. You shouldn't be leaning back in your chair. I also had another trick. If I wasn't sure if I'd create rapport, I would touch my face. Unconsciously, they would touch their face if we had created rapport. Or I'd put my hands out in front of me. And unconsciously, they would mirror what I was doing. You've created rapport then. And it's the art of listening. You have two ears and one mouth. Use them in those in that way. It's the 80-20 rule. They should be talking 80% of the time. You should be talking 20% of the time. Ask, don't tell. Because remember, if there's no problem, there's no sale. Why would you buy something if you didn't need it? So your job is to uncover that problem. And you also want to know if there's competition. So you might want to write this down. I'll say it twice. Though most people only meet with me, have you talked with anybody else? Though most people only meet with me, have you talked with anybody else? Because you don't want to suggest that they talk to somebody else, but you certainly want to know if they talk to somebody else. Next slide. It's really important that you talk to the decision maker. Sometimes you go in talking to somebody else. You know, you need to talk to the CFO because he's the final decision maker, but you're talking to HR or you're talking to an engineer. Let's take the engineer. You explain everything about your product. And he goes, well, I'll talk to my boss. And then you know, the minute you leave the room, he immediately forgets 50%. 3 days later, when he actually meets with his boss, he's probably forgotten another 20%. It's also the problem that their problem may not be the same. He's thinking, wow, if they put this in place, this will like make my job so easy. The CFO is looking at the return on investment. Gee, I make this guy's job easier, but you know, that's his job. Unless there's other things this guy could be doing, or they could get rid of a position, what is the value of them actually buying what that person was talking about? And the decision maker may have totally different questions that the other person didn't ask you, and he doesn't know that information. So you want to meet with the decision maker. You can have the other person with you, but you want to meet with the decision maker. Another important thing is, can you afford this product or service? Do they have a budget? You can do a base plan with add-ons if you know that they have a certain budget. You can do a 2-year rollout if they have a certain budget. It's really important, and it's hard to ask that question, but it's great if you know if they have a budget for what you are suggesting. My next most important thing that you write down, and I'll say it twice, is what needs to occur for you to move forward. A very gentle way of getting to the next step. What needs to occur for you to move forward? That question can open up so many things. One, that may be when you find out you're not talking to the decision maker. Or you may find out that they're moving next week. Or they're waiting for money to come in for a big sale. All of which is going to push out. So you know when to get back to them, when to be positioned, who you should be talking to. The other thing is always have more prospects. A lot of people, like for example, if they're consultants, they're so busy with contracts, they stop prospecting. All of a sudden the contract ends and they've got no one to work with. The key is have lots of prospects. I used to, call people in November and they say, "Oh, let's talk in January after the holidays." If I met with everybody who said that to me, I wouldn't have slept in January, but I slept every January, but I had a whole list of people to reach for months going forward. And best of all, make the sale. Dick?
Yes, Beverly. Thank you, Beverly. All right, let's wrap up by talking about goal setting. Because you need to be able to track your progress to your goals. You got to set goals, then track your progress to be able to meet them. So, what's a good goal? Well, a good goal depends on your business and what you're comfortable with. So, a goal might be, well, I want to increase my take-home compensation by 10% next year. Or a goal might be, I want to grow my sales by $100,000 next year. Or I want to add 5 new clients next year. Those are all legitimate and very workable goals. But how are you going to reach them? So you need to prepare what I call a recipe for success, which has to do with the basics. Your basics are your calls, your meetings, your proposals. How many of those do you need to make in order to reach your goal? And what are the behaviors that you need to do to make connections, to connect to your prospects, so you get those calls or meetings or proposals? So those may be networking events or sending out targeted emails, responding to inbound inquiries. Those are all the behaviors you need to do. But what I want to focus on now is um, establishing and creating that recipe for success. So let's pick a simple goal with math that's easy. Let's say your goal is to add 12 new clients next year. Well, that means you want to add 1 new client every month. And you know just from your past experience that if you meet with 4 different prospects, if you have 4 meetings, one of those new prospects is going to become a client. That's that, and you can change that, but we have to start with an assumption about something that's based on your past history. So therefore, in order to get that 1 new client every month, you need to have a prospect meeting every week on average, so that you get those 4 meetings every week in the month, and one of those prospect meetings will turn into a new client. And you also know that if you have 25 one-on-one connections or conversations, whether it's at networking events and you meet 4 people, that's 4 connections. Whether you respond to 6 inbound inquiries about your product, that's 6 connections. If you have 25 connections, you know that one of those is going to turn into a meeting, again, just based on your past experience. So that's your recipe. If you make 25 connections every week by cold calling, by answering emails, by responding to your social media inquiries, by going to networking events and speaking to people, by following up on a webinar you gave. If you meet and have conversations with 25 new people every week, one of those is going to turn into a meeting that week. And getting 4 of those in that month is going to get you that 1 new client. That's your recipes for success. So thank you for joining us. Teresa, you want to follow up and conclude?
Yeah, I don't have any questions that have been submitted. We kind of answered a few as we were going through.
Okay.
Certainly, if anyone thinks of anything that, after we hang up today, please reach out to us. You can email me at connect@bbmentors.org. It's also the same email address that's on our newsletter. So reach out, ask that question, connect with the mentor. And if you enjoyed today's presentation or any of our other webinars, consider supporting Boston Business Mentors as well, as you're planning your holiday support. But, even a small amount like $10 is great. Every little bit helps. So thank you, Dick and Beverly, for volunteering your time to share your knowledge with everyone today. And please watch for those December events we have coming up, and we hope to see you then.
Thanks,
And
everyone. Thank you, Beverly.
if anyone would like to meet with Dick and I, please, reach out to us. We'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Happy holidays. Thanks.